Manhattan never sleeps, but tonight it felt different, as if the city itself were holding its breath. On the 47th floor of a glass tower, Clara Monroe stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, the endless web of lights below reflecting in her eyes. Every car honk, every distant siren, every whispering breeze seemed amplified, carrying secrets that only the sharpest ears could catch. She didn't speak. She didn't move. And yet, in that silence, she commanded more attention than any boardroom or ballroom ever could. Somewhere in the streets, deals were being made in shadows, promises exchanged in glances, betrayals plotted in hushed tones. One wrong step, one careless word, and decades of wealth and influence could vanish in an instant. Clara's fingers lightly traced the edge of the window sill, her mind racing, calculating, observing. Power, she knew, was never about the loudest voice or the biggest title. It was about patience, perception, and the terrifying mastery of staying silent. Tonight, Manhattan's skyline was her chessboard, and every shadow was a move waiting to be played. Manhattan never really sleeps. The city moves in pulses, headlights weaving through avenues, neon signs flickering in the rain, the occasional wail of a distant siren. But up here, on the 47th floor of a glass skyscraper, everything felt paused. Clara Monroe stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of her penthouse, the lights of the city below spilling across her face like liquid gold. She didn't speak. She didn't move. And yet, in that stillness she was fully awake, acutely aware of every movement, every flicker, every sound. The inheritance she had received wasn't just money. It was influence, legacy, and responsibility, a tangled web of power that extended from the boardrooms of Wall Street to the hidden backstreets of neighborhoods she barely knew. Manhattan was a jungle of ambition, greed, and whispered secrets. And tonight she was learning that survival in this world required more than wealth. It demanded awareness, patience, and the quiet mastery of knowing what was happening before anyone else did. She glanced down at the streets far below. Yellow taxis moved like tiny metal insects along the avenues, and the occasional cab driver's blare cut sharply through the evening hum. A streetlight cast a long shadow of a pedestrian walking briskly, brief and flickering, as though the city itself was giving signals only she could understand. Somewhere, deals were being struck in dimly lit rooms. Somewhere else, a secret was being exchanged with a glance. To anyone else, these were ordinary moments. To Clara, they were the subtle currents of power that she needed to navigate. Eli Romano stood quietly behind her. He didn't need to speak. His presence alone was an unspoken acknowledgement of the stakes. "You're reading the city like a book," he said softly, almost to himself. Clara didn't turn. Her eyes remained fixed on the skyline. "Every city has a rhythm. You just have to know how to listen," she replied, her voice calm, measured. The elevator's soft hum brought them down to the lobby, where the warm glow of lighting contrasted with the cool, dark city outside. Staff and visitors instinctively made way, their movements polite but cautious. There was a weight in Clara's silence that carried authority beyond her years. Every gesture she made was deliberate, her heels clicking softly on the polished marble, her coat falling precisely across her shoulders. Manhattan might have been filled with noise and chaos, but up close she noticed the patterns: who avoided her gaze, who lingered too long, who moved too quickly. Outside, the city breathed around them, distant car horns, the shuffle of footsteps, a siren fading into the night, but Clara filtered it all, picking out the details that mattered. She imagined every possible angle: routes, escape paths, hidden threats, unseen allies. The city itself was alive, and every block, alley, and rooftop could become a chessboard in her hands. "Eli," she said quietly, "wealth isn't power. Influence is. And influence is fragile." He nodded, scanning the street. "Then we move carefully. Watch everything, anticipate everything. Silence is our weapon." The black car waiting curbside was sleek, nondescript. Clara slid into the back seat, her fingers brushing the leather lightly, memorizing every texture, every detail. Eli followed. No words were needed. Every light, every shadow, every pedestrian was part of the unfolding puzzle. Manhattan was predictable to those who knew how to observe. The car turned onto quieter streets, illuminated by fire escapes and glowing street signs. Clara's eyes traced every corner, every shadow, every reflection on glass. Patterns emerged. She noted timing, spacing, and angles. Even the smallest detail, the way a door swung, the way someone adjusted their coat, could be intelligence if interpreted correctly. She opened her small leather-bound notebook, flipping to pages filled with maps, codes, and cryptic notes. Each mark, each symbol was part of a larger strategy. Her father's words echoed in her mind: observe first, speak last. Never reveal everything you know. That mantra guided every movement, every glance, every calculation. A subtle vibration from her phone brought her attention to a single encrypted message. Everything is in place. Midnight. No name. No sender. Just a signal demanding understanding. Clara didn't flinch. This was exactly what she had prepared for. Ambiguity, necessity, opportunity. Eli glanced at her. Ready? Clara met his eyes, cool and composed. Always. But we wait. Observation first. Action later. The car rolled into the underground garage, leaving the noise and chaos of the streets behind. The city above continued, oblivious, but every shadow, every light, every step was now part of Clara's game. Each movement she made, each decision she considered, was calculated. Manhattan was hers to read, to interpret, to master. As she stepped into the private elevator leading to her hidden strategy room, Clara felt the weight of the city in her chest. Not oppressive, but exhilarating. Here, in silence and in shadow, she could control the board. Here she would plan her first moves. And here the heiress awakened. Manhattan's night seemed alive in ways the casual observer could never notice. From above, the streets shimmered like molten silver under the glow of street lamps and neon signs. Clara Monroe leaned lightly against the polished edge of her strategy room's window, letting the city's pulse seep into her awareness. Somewhere below, on streets she knew too well, signals were moving, invisible currents carrying messages meant for those attuned to them. Eli Romano stood beside her, silent as ever, watching the same streets. They had learned to communicate in glances, in subtle gestures. No words were necessary. Tonight, their mission was simple in theory but complex in execution. Identify a newcomer in the network, gauge their intent, and ensure the Monroe legacy remained unchallenged. The first sign appeared almost imperceptibly. A black SUV paused at a corner across the avenue. Its engine idled quietly, but Clara's trained eyes noticed the way the headlights didn't fully illuminate the sidewalk. Someone inside was observing, waiting. A soft tap on Eli's shoulder indicated she had noted it. They're testing the waters, she whispered, her voice calm but sharp. Eli nodded. Or setting a trap. Either way, they're predictable. Clara moved to her desk, fingers brushing the worn leather of a notebook filled with maps, symbols, and coded notes. Each mark was a point of reference. Allies, potential threats, observation points. Her eyes flicked back to the street as she aligned these mental maps with real-world patterns. Manhattan to most was chaos. To Clara it was a chessboard, every vehicle, pedestrian, and building a piece to be accounted for. The SUV started moving slowly, hugging the shadows along the avenue. Clara noted every turn, every pause, mentally tracking the driver's behavior. Eli silently entered the data into his tablet, confirming her observations. They shared no words, just a glance, a signal of acknowledgement and assessment. Clara finally spoke, breaking the silence. We need eyes in the alley behind 42nd. If they're trying to approach through unconventional routes, we'll know. Eli raised an eyebrow, a faint smirk crossing his otherwise serious expression. I already anticipated that. He tapped the screen. Surveillance feeds showed a dim figure moving toward the alley. Shadows stretched long under the flickering street lamps. The figure stopped, scanned the surroundings and moved again, cautious but deliberate. Clara leaned forward, reading every nuance. Body language tells me they're experienced. Not a rookie. Calm, confident, waiting for a sign. Could be a rival or someone testing allegiance. The clock ticked quietly. Midnight approached. Clara's heartbeat matched its rhythm, steady, deliberate, alert. She was aware that in the world she had inherited, timing was everything. A wrong move, a misread signal, and years of influence could unravel in minutes. Prepare the blinds and lights, she instructed Eli. We need control of what they see and what we reveal. Eli's hands moved quickly, drawing the blinds, adjusting the lighting. Shadows danced across the room, breaking her silhouette into fragments, making it harder for anyone outside to read her reactions. Clara liked this. Control of perception was as powerful as control of information. She moved to the desk, pulled out a small encrypted device. I want live feeds from all surrounding rooftops. Every angle, every shadow. Cross-reference with traffic cams. Her voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. Eli complied, tapping the screens. Multiple cameras now displayed a composite view. Streets, rooftops, alleyways, each angle feeding into their strategy. Clara's eyes scanned the feeds, picking out anomalies, movements out of rhythm, anything that might indicate intentions. Minutes passed. The SUV slowed near a fire escape. A single figure stepped out, moving cautiously. Clara's eyes narrowed. "They're observing like I said. Now watch." She gestured subtly, indicating how they would proceed. Eli followed, understanding every nuance without a word. From her vantage point, Clara noted the figure's posture, the weight distribution, even the small gestures of the hands. Right hand slightly raised, left foot forward, a defensive stance. "Anticipating a response," she murmured. Eli typed rapidly, documenting the patterns. "Could be reconnaissance. Could be an approach. We'll need to intercept subtly without revealing our awareness." Clara considered options. There was the direct approach, risky, confrontational but immediate. Or the indirect, watch, gather intelligence, manipulate perception. She chose the latter. "We don't engage yet," she said. "Let them believe they're unseen. Every move we anticipate becomes our advantage." Her mind wandered briefly, reflecting on her father's advice. True power isn't in the act, but in the knowledge of it. Control the board before making a move. Clara smiled faintly. That principle guided everything she did. The figure paused again, this time near a dumpster, seemingly waiting. Clara noted the positioning of potential escape routes, street traffic, and line of sight from nearby windows. She felt the thrill of anticipation. This was what she had trained for, what she had inherited. Not fear. Not anxiety. But acute awareness, a precision honed over nights of observation and silent calculation. Eli leaned closer. "They're scanning the building now. It won't be long before they make a decision." Clara nodded. "Then we continue as planned. Shadows are our ally." She moved to the mini-map on her desk, marking escape routes, observation points, and potential intercept locations. Each move was silent, deliberate, leaving no trace. In Manhattan, visible moves were vulnerabilities. Invisible influence, that was the real power. The figure made a subtle shift, testing a line of sight. Clara's gaze followed, calculating probability, adjusting her mental map. "They're confident but inexperienced with this building. Too much focus on one angle. We can exploit that." Eli glanced at her, impressed by the analysis. "You've already predicted their first 3 moves." Clara allowed herself a small nod. "That's all we need for now." Time stretched, silent except for the hum of monitors and the distant noise of the city. Clara watched, measured, calculated. Every heartbeat, every step, every shadow could change the outcome. Manhattan itself had become a living chessboard, and she was fully awake, every sense aligned with strategy, ready to make the first subtle move that would determine the night. The figure near the dumpster shifted slightly, and Clara's eyes followed every motion, recording details almost subconsciously. Even the smallest adjustment in posture or the tilt of the head could reveal intent. She traced the lines of the alleyway with her mind, noting fire escapes, streetlights, dumpsters, and even the faint graffiti along the brick walls. A visual map of potential routes, observation points, and hidden corners. Eli, ever vigilant, didn't speak, but his fingers hovered over the tablet, adjusting surveillance feeds, tracking movement patterns, cross-referencing timestamps with previous incidents. They didn't need words. Their communication was instinctive, honed through countless silent hours of strategizing. "This isn't random," Clara murmured. "They're deliberate, testing reactions. They think they control the narrative." Eli glanced up at her, a faint smirk breaking his serious expression. "And what do you think?" She allowed a small, controlled smile. "That they haven't seen the full board. Not yet. And when they do, it won't be what they expected." A sudden movement from the figure caught her attention. A brief glance toward a second street, a flicker of reflection from a phone screen. Clara's mind raced. She mapped probable escape routes, possible surveillance overlaps, and potential threats to her team. Manhattan's night was a maze, and she had memorized every street, every alley, every hidden vantage point. The hum of distant traffic, the intermittent flash of neon signs, and the faint buzz of a nearby billboard became part of her awareness. Each sound was a signal, each shadow a potential cue. She adjusted the blinds, altering the light inside her observation room to ensure her silhouette remained undetectable. Visibility was control. Control was power. Clara leaned toward the desk, scribbling quick notes on the notebook she carried everywhere. Each symbol, line, and mark represented calculations, probability, timing, and movement. Her father's mantra echoed in her mind, "In this world, knowledge is not enough. Anticipation is everything." Eli's voice broke the silence, calm but precise. "If they move along the east alley, we intercept at Point Bravo. If they linger, we maintain observation and feed false signals. Clara nodded slightly, processing the variables. Then we prepare both. The element of choice is ours. And remember, shadows are our ally, not our enemy. Minutes passed. The figure moved cautiously, testing the angles, adjusting for the unpredictable. Wind, reflections, passing pedestrians. Clara noted every tiny adjustment, the way their foot shifted, the hand brushing a coat pocket, the hesitation in a glance. Each motion was a piece of data, feeding her internal model of prediction. She remembered the first night she had walked these streets, following her father's instructions, absorbing the nuances of urban movement, learning the rhythms of the city. Back then she had been nervous, aware of her youth and inexperience. Tonight, though, she was fully present, fully prepared. Observation was second nature. Anticipation was instinct. A taxi rolled past, headlights reflecting briefly on the alley's wet pavement. The figure paused, reacting subtly to the light. Clara's eyes tracked the motion, recalculating potential outcomes. "They're reacting to cues," she whispered. "They think we're unaware, but we control the perception." Eli's tablet pinged softly, indicating a minor deviation in the figure's path. "Slight misstep," he noted. "Calculating impact." Clara allowed herself a brief moment to breathe, letting the city's energy flow into her. Manhattan had always been alive, but tonight it was heightened, almost tangible, a living organism of opportunity and threat. Every street, every shadow, every flicker of light was part of a system she now commanded. The figure moved again, this time toward a fire escape. Clara noted the speed, the timing, and the risk involved. "They're confident," she said softly. "But overconfident. That's always a weakness." Eli's eyes met hers. "And when they overreach?" Clara's smile was subtle, barely perceptible. "Then we show them the full board." She returned to her maps, cross-referencing routes, sightlines, and potential observation posts. Each decision was preemptive, each calculation meticulous. Time seemed to stretch, every second weighted with potential consequence. Manhattan's sounds became a symphony of data. The distant siren, the rhythm of footsteps, the hum of neon, each note accounted for, analyzed, and interpreted. Then, a subtle signal from the figure, a pause, a glance, a brief hand movement. Clara's pulse quickened slightly, a reminder that even the best-laid plans could shift in an instant. She adjusted the blinds further, allowing shadows to fall in precise patterns, altering what could be seen from outside. Perception, she reminded herself, was everything. Eli's voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "They've started the approach." Clara's eyes narrowed. This was the moment she had been anticipating. Every scenario she had run through in her mind now aligned with reality. "Let them think they're moving freely," she said. "We wait. We observe. Then we act." From her vantage point, she watched as the figure ascended the fire escape, slow and deliberate, scanning windows and ledges. Clara calculated angles, timing, and potential lines of sight. Every action the figure took was now feeding into her strategy. Minutes stretched into a tense rhythm. Clara's fingers traced the edges of the notebook, following invisible lines of calculation. She could almost predict the next move, a glance toward the alley below, a pause at the landing, and assessment of the building's response. The city outside continued its rhythm, unaware of the silent game being played above. Finally, the figure paused at a midpoint, seemingly evaluating options. Clara exhaled softly, allowing the tension to sharpen her focus. She glanced at Eli. "Everything we've predicted holds. Now it's time to subtly guide their next move." Eli's acknowledgement was a mere nod, but it carried weight. They were aligned. In the shadows of Manhattan, amidst the flicker of streetlights and distant traffic, strategy and observation ruled. Every decision, every signal, every moment of silence carried power. And Clara Monroe, fully awake and acutely aware, was prepared to wield it. The figure on the fire escape lingered for a moment as if testing the environment. Clara leaned closer to the window, eyes sharp, noting every micro-movement. A foot shifted slightly, a hand brushed a railing, the subtle angle of the head indicating awareness. She catalogued it all in her mind. Experience and instinct worked together. Every small gesture was data feeding her strategy. Her pulse was steady, but internally her mind raced. Years of training, observation, and inherited lessons converged into this precise moment. She remembered her first night in Manhattan, learning to read the city like a living organism. The rhythm of cars, the whispers of pedestrians, the glint of light on a fire escape. Back then the challenge had been overwhelming. Tonight it was exhilarating. Eli leaned in, voice low, almost a whisper. They're assessing. I give it less than 2 minutes before they make a move. Clara nodded slightly, eyes never leaving the figure. Then we let them think they have the initiative. Illusions are often stronger than reality. The shadows of the alley stretched long under the flickering street lamps. Clara adjusted the blinds, altering light patterns within the room. Outside, the figure hesitated, apparently unsettled by subtle changes in perception. Her strategy was working. Control what they could see, control what they believed. Her mind ran through contingencies. If the figure tried to ascend further, they'd be exposed. If they retreated, it would signal caution and lack of confidence. Every possibility was analyzed, every outcome weighted. Manhattan streets became a silent chessboard. Every pedestrian, taxi, and fire escape became part of the larger calculation. A sudden noise, a loose metal lid clattering in a side alley, caused the figure to pause and glance down. Clara noted it immediately. They're reacting, she whispered. Not just to us but to the environment. That's a weakness we can exploit. Eli's fingers hovered over the tablet, cross-referencing the feed with prior movement patterns. Minor distraction, he said. But effective. Could give us the edge we need. Clara leaned back slightly, allowing herself a brief exhale. She allowed the tension to sharpen her focus rather than diminish it. She imagined every potential move the figure could make. A retreat, an escalation, a misstep. Every calculation fed into a preemptive strategy. The city outside continued its restless rhythm. A taxi horn blared in the distance, a pedestrian laughed far below, and neon signs blinked incessantly. To any casual observer it was ordinary. But Clara read it all, light, sound, motion, and interpreted it in terms of advantage. Prepare for a shift in strategy, she said, voice calm. They may attempt a misdirection. We can't afford to react too early, but we need to anticipate. Eli's acknowledgement was subtle. A nod, a slight adjustment of the tablet. His eyes scanned the building across the street. If they choose the rooftop route, we intercept subtly. If they remain at street level, observation only. No exposure. Clara tapped her fingers on the desk lightly. Every move is a signal. And every signal can be controlled. She glanced at the figure again. They were starting to move, carefully, deliberately, testing each angle, each line of sight. Her internal calculations ran in tandem, predicting trajectories, evaluating risk, and planning contingencies. Time seemed elastic. Each second stretched into eternity. Clara allowed herself to focus on the smallest details. The reflection of light on a fire escape railing, the way the wind shifted a loose piece of fabric, the faint hum of a distant HVAC unit. Every sensory input became data. Every observation could be leveraged. The figure paused midway, perhaps sensing a misalignment or maybe questioning the plan. Clara observed, silent but calculating. They're overconfident, she said to Eli. And overconfidence is predictable. The wind shifted, carrying the faint sound of footsteps from an alleyway farther down. Clara noted the direction, the cadence, the weight, another potential player entering the scenario. She adjusted her mental map immediately. Manhattan had many layers, and tonight, every layer was relevant. Eli whispered, additional variable detected. Could be ally, or a complication. Clara didn't flinch. Treat it as a complication, she said. We'll exploit it if it favors us. If not, it's irrelevant. Focus on the figure. Minutes passed. The figure's attention wavered slightly, and Clara recognized the moment. We guide perception now, she murmured. Every adjustment of the blinds, every movement within the room, every slight gesture became part of the manipulation. They would never see her true positioning, never perceive the depth of her strategy. The figure finally moved, cautiously making their way down. Clara predicted each step, anticipating hesitation and decision points. She watched the subtle changes in pace, the angle of the head, the grip on a railing. Every micro-behavior reinforced the pattern she had already calculated. Eli's voice was quiet, precise. They've chosen the alley. All observation points ready. No engagement unless necessary. Clara nodded, heart steady, mind alert. Remember, control perception. Our silence is more powerful than any confrontation. Let them believe they're initiating. Let them reveal intentions through movement. And when the time comes, she let the words hang, unspoken, full of intent. The figure disappeared briefly behind a corner. Clara and Eli watched silently. Every scenario she had predicted was unfolding. Every detail mattered: shadows, light, sound, timing. The city below hummed, unaware, while above, in the quiet calculation of strategy and observation, power shifted imperceptibly. Finally, a faint reflection caught Clara's eye, a glint of metal in the figure's hand, perhaps a phone, perhaps a device. She adjusted the blinds further, controlling what could be seen. Every perception, every detail, was now entirely under her influence. She exhaled softly, letting the tension sharpen her senses rather than overwhelm them. Manhattan was alive, layered, and intricate. Every alley, rooftop, and street corner was part of the board. And she, Clara Monroe, fully awake, was poised to make the moves that would define the night. In the shadows, in the signals, in the silence, the Heiress operated. The figure emerged from the corner, briefly illuminated by the flickering neon of a nearby deli sign. Clara's eyes tracked every micro-movement, noting hesitation and subtle shifts in posture. Her pulse remained calm, but internally, every neuron fired, cataloging patterns and predicting next moves. Manhattan had taught her that seconds could mean advantage, or disaster. Eli leaned close. They're approaching faster than expected. Could indicate urgency or desperation. Clara tilted her head slightly, eyes narrowing. Or overconfidence. Either way, we stay invisible. Let them reveal themselves. Silence is our signal now. The wind shifted, carrying the faint sound of footsteps from an intersecting street. Clara immediately factored this into her calculations. Another player, perhaps an ally, or a hidden threat. She adjusted mental maps, aligning probabilities and potential outcomes. Then a sudden metallic clatter, trash can lid tipping over in an alley. The figure flinched, glanced briefly toward the sound, and continued. Clara noted the reaction. They're human, she whispered, almost amused. Even the most careful make small errors. We record and exploit them. Minutes stretched. She leaned closer to the window, eyes scanning the rooftops. A faint reflection caught her attention, a glint of metal in the figure's hand. Perhaps a device, perhaps a phone. She adjusted blinds subtly, creating shadows that concealed her exact positioning. Perception was everything. The enemy could not know what she saw. Eli's voice was quiet but firm. If they try a rooftop route, we intercept. If they stay at street level, we maintain surveillance. No direct engagement yet. Clara's fingers hovered over her notebook, tracing lines on a map. Let's force them into a predictable path. The one they think is advantage is a trap. The figure moved again, cautiously, testing angles and lines of sight. Clara mentally recorded every hesitation, every glance, every shift in body weight. Manhattan, she realized, was more than streets and buildings. It was a living organism of information, and she had learned to read it like text. Suddenly, a shadow detached from a doorway across the street. Clara's heart skipped a fraction, an unexpected variable. She traced the movement, not aggressive but deliberate, watching, waiting. Another player in the game. They've added complexity, Eli observed. Clara exhaled softly, a small smile on her lips. Good. Complexity favors us if we anticipate correctly. The figure on the alley continued forward, unaware of the secondary observer. Clara noted the subtle change in gait, a flick of the wrist, a pause, tiny movements revealing intent. She whispered instructions to Eli, who adjusted the surveillance feeds accordingly. Time became elastic, each second stretched by tension and calculation. Clara's internal monologue ran rapidly. If they go left, we control the intersection. If right, we guide them past the decoy. Maintain observation. Do not act. Let them commit. Let them reveal. A distant car horn, the shuffle of late-night pedestrians, the faint hum of a generator, all became part of her sensory data. Every sound a variable, every light a factor. Manhattan was alive, but to Clara, it was a chessboard, every move predictable if read correctly. The figure finally paused near a fire escape, seemingly reassessing. Clara leaned back, letting herself absorb the entire scene. She had anticipated this hesitation. Their pause is our opportunity, she murmured. Eli nodded, following her gaze. Decision point imminent. Clara's thoughts shifted briefly to her father's lessons. True power isn't in what you do but in what you can foresee. Control what others believe and you control them. The words guided her like a compass, aligning observation and action. From her vantage point, she could see every potential escape route, every line of sight from nearby buildings, every reflection on glass surfaces. She considered contingencies for each variable, mapping the consequences. Every minor adjustment of the figure's body, every hesitation, fed into her pre-calculated strategy. Finally, the figure moved, testing the fire escape. Clara predicted the trajectory, identified the pause point, and noted the timing. Eli whispered, "They're committing to the path." Clara's lips curved in a faint, controlled smile. "Good. Let's guide perception. They'll think they control the narrative. They won't realize they're moving exactly where we want them." A sudden reflection in the glass showed a second figure approaching from another street. Clara's pulse remained steady. She cataloged this new variable, integrating it into her mental model. Manhattan had layers, intersections of influence and threat, and every layer tonight mattered. Secondary variable, Eli murmured. Unknown intentions. Could be ally, could be complication. Clara's gaze never wavered. Treat as complication. If it benefits us, exploit. If not, irrelevant. Maintain focus on the primary subject. The figure on the alley moved again, almost imperceptibly adjusting posture, scanning for surveillance. Clara noted subtle shifts, head angle, grip, pace. Each was a clue, each contributing to the picture she had already formed. She adjusted the blinds once more, controlling interior lighting. Shadows fell in deliberate patterns, concealing true positioning. Her influence on perception was complete. The figure could not know what she saw, could not anticipate the extent of her calculation. Time slowed, yet pressure remained. Clara's senses were heightened, awareness expanded to include everything. City sounds, reflections, movement, timing, and the silent communication between her and Eli. Every second now was a potential turning point, every decision invisible but consequential. Finally, the figure paused at a corner, looking up toward her building. Clara recognized the moment as an opportunity, momentary indecision, a slight misalignment in intent. She whispered, "All signals align. Prepare subtle redirection." Eli adjusted feeds, monitored other streets. Ready on all angles. Clara exhaled, calm and collected. "Then we wait. Observe. And when the moment comes," she let the words hang. The strategy was set, the night a living board, and the moves to come would define control over this corner of Manhattan. In the shadows the heiress operated. Fully aware. Fully awake. Fully in control. The streets below were quieter now, but the city's pulse never truly stopped. Manhattan's hum of distant traffic, occasional sirens, and the subtle whisper of the wind between buildings provided a backdrop that seemed almost alive. Clara Monroe stood by the window of her penthouse, eyes tracing the movement below. The black SUV from the previous night had returned, and a figure emerged from it, moving cautiously along the sidewalk. Clara tilted her head, analyzing the gait, posture, and pace. Every detail was a potential clue. She didn't speak at first, she didn't need to. The world below could only be observed, never anticipated with complete certainty, but every second of observation added advantage. Eli, standing silently behind her, broke the quiet. Primary subject approaching alley entrance. Secondary figure still unaccounted for. Clara's gaze sharpened. We proceed with caution. The first engagement will set the tone. Any mistake now, and they'll know our capabilities too soon. The figure paused beneath a flickering streetlight, scanning the entrance to the alley as if weighing options. Clara observed the micro-expressions, the subtle flex of hands, the brief hesitation in their step. Confident but inexperienced with this building, she murmured. They're testing control, too many assumptions. We exploit that. Minutes stretched, tension mounting. Clara activated interior lighting controls, shifting shadows across the room to mask her movements. Every reflection on the glass, every faint silhouette was deliberate. The perception of inaction was often more powerful than action itself. Eli tapped lightly on his tablet. All cameras are live. We have full coverage. The alley, street level, rooftops, and emergency exits. Clara nodded. Good. Prepare contingency routes for both subjects. If they divide, we adjust accordingly. Timing and positioning are everything. Outside the figures moved. One approached the alley cautiously, while the secondary figure lingered near the SUV, possibly observing. Clara's eyes darted between them, noting every angle, every shadow. Manhattan was a chessboard, and tonight she had the advantage of foresight. She whispered instructions to Eli, subtle gestures coordinating strategy without a single word audible to the outside world. Intercept at point delta if primary moves left. Maintain surveillance if right. Secondary remains distraction. Do not engage unless necessary. Eli nodded, executing the plan with precision. Both understood that the first confrontation, silent as it might be, would establish the rules for the night. Power in Manhattan was often claimed not by noise or aggression, but by careful control of information and perception. A sudden motion, a glance over a shoulder from the primary figure, signaled awareness of potential surveillance. Clara's pulse remained steady. She had predicted this reaction. Let them believe they see us. We control what they think they know, she murmured. The alley became a stage. Shadows shifted as if choreographed, light flickering from street lamps creating intermittent cover. Clara's mind raced through probabilities, movement patterns, escape options, possible allies or traps, and reactions from both subjects. Every detail was a data point. Suddenly, the primary figure stopped, reaching toward a device in their coat. Clara's breath caught for a split second, an action long anticipated. She leaned slightly toward Eli, signaling her assessment. They're sending a signal. Could be a test, could be coordination. Either way, they've exposed intent. Eli's fingers flew over the tablet. We have timing. Adjusting feeds to highlight possible interception points. Primary subject is within predicted parameters. Secondary may attempt approach in 5 seconds. Clara's mind aligned. This was the moment she had prepared for. Every scenario she had calculated now unfolded in real time. Her strategy was simple. Observe, manipulate perception, and guide the adversary's choices without overt action. The silent control of narrative, she knew, was more powerful than confrontation. The figures moved, splitting briefly. Clara anticipated their paths, readying mental contingencies for each. The alley's shadows became a tool, her own movements invisible against the city lights. Each step, each glance, each minor adjustment in posture by the figures reinforced her strategy. Minutes felt like hours. The primary figure reached a point Clara had predicted, hesitated, and looked toward the secondary observer. The misalignment was slight but significant. She whispered to Eli, "Now we subtly direct. They think they are in control. Let's confirm it." Eli's acknowledgement was nearly imperceptible. His focus remained on the feeds, ensuring that every possible variable was accounted for. The secondary figure made a small step forward, likely testing response. Clara recognized it immediately. "They're predictable," she said softly. "We will not need force tonight. Influence is enough." The first confrontation, though subtle and silent, had established the hierarchy. Clara's presence, unseen yet omnipresent, dictated every move. The figures moved along paths she had already anticipated, unknowingly guided by her calculation. Manhattan's night hummed around them, unaware that a silent game of power and strategy had already begun above its streets. Clara exhaled softly. The first confrontation had not required action, only observation and influence. It was the perfect demonstration of her philosophy. Power was not about noise, threats, or overt displays. It was about controlling perception, guiding choices, and maintaining the advantage unseen. Eli glanced at her. First engagement complete. They haven't realized the depth of control yet. Clara allowed herself a slight smile. And they won't. Not until it's too late. The night stretched on, Manhattan alive beneath them, oblivious to the silent chess game unfolding. Shadows, signals, and observation now defined the battle. And in that stillness, the heiress reaffirmed her mastery, fully aware, fully awake, and fully in control. The primary figure hesitated at the midpoint of the alley, glancing over a shoulder as if second-guessing the path they had chosen. Clara noted the tension in the shoulders, the slight shift in weight, the deliberate placement of feet. These micro-movements, invisible to anyone untrained, told her more than any words could. Her mind raced silently. They think they are in control. They don't know I've already predicted this. Every hesitation, every glance, every minor misstep is feeding the outcome I want. Clara's pulse remained calm, steady, almost serene. Yet beneath that exterior, her mind was a whirlwind of calculation and anticipation. Manhattan streets were alive with sound, distant sirens, the hum of late-night traffic, the occasional bark of a dog, footsteps echoing off brick walls, and each noise was a signal, a potential variable in the unfolding game. Eli, standing close, spoke softly. They're testing their options again. Could be waiting for backup. Could be looking for an exit strategy. Clara tilted her head slightly, eyes narrowing. Then we maintain the illusion. Let them believe the initiative is theirs. Every move they make under that assumption is data for us. The secondary figure shifted as well, stepping closer to the edge of the street, appearing to assess multiple angles. Clara's gaze followed, noting every pause, every tilt of the head, every flick of a hand. She visualized probable trajectories, escape paths, lines of sight, potential cross-traffic, and even the timing of passing vehicles. The city is a living chessboard, and every piece is moving exactly as predicted. Her fingers traced subtle lines on the leather-bound notebook at her side. Symbols and shorthand denoted observation points, calculated probabilities and contingency plans. Clara's father's words echoed, "Power isn't given, it's understood. Control perception and you control the board." Outside, the shadows deepened as a street lamp flickered, briefly illuminating the alley. The primary figure reacted immediately, shifting their stance, adjusting the device in their hand, likely a phone or signal transmitter. Clara's lips curved into a faint, controlled smile. The action confirmed her prediction, revealing their intent and level of experience. Eli's fingers moved deftly across his tablet, updating feeds from multiple angles, providing a dynamic overview of the situation. "We've got every path covered. Any deviation will be visible immediately." Clara nodded subtly, her mind weighing each potential move. "Patience is the key. We let them make the first visible decision. And when they do, we exploit the outcome without revealing ourselves." The primary figure's attention shifted momentarily to the secondary figure, creating a slight misalignment in their coordination. Clara's analytical mind immediately registered the advantage. They're predictable. Overconfidence is always the weak point. A taxi's headlights briefly washed the alley in harsh white light, forcing both figures to pause, their attention momentarily diverted. Clara noted every hesitation, every glance toward the incoming vehicle. She calculated that if the secondary figure attempted to flank, there was a clear advantage point from a nearby rooftop, an observation post she had noted days earlier. Eli whispered, "Potential flank from the east. Timing is critical." Clara's eyes flicked to the rooftop, assessing angles, calculating response time, predicting movement. Let them come. All variables accounted for. They won't realize until it's too late. Time seemed to slow as the figures made tentative steps forward. Clara watched with intense focus, heart steady, mind active. Every shadow, every reflection, every movement of passing pedestrians was analyzed. The city had become both a tool and a stage, a complex environment manipulated by her observations and adjustments. Suddenly, the primary figure paused again, glancing upward, a brief hesitation that Clara had anticipated. Her fingers tapped lightly against the notebook. "This is the moment. Every micro-reaction aligns with predictions." Eli's voice was low, urgent, yet controlled. "They're committing to the alley. Prepare subtle redirection." Clara exhaled softly. She leaned toward the window, shifting the blinds, casting shadows to conceal her true positioning. Every change in light, every shadow, was deliberate, designed to guide perception without direct interference. They believed they were unobserved. That belief was her advantage. The secondary figure made a subtle movement, adjusting their line of sight, testing the environment. Clara's mind ran scenarios rapidly: retreat, approach, signaling, misdirection. Every option had contingencies, every contingency had a counter. "Watch for small mistakes," she whispered to Eli. "Even the most careful slip once. And that slip gives us leverage." Minutes stretched. The primary figure ascended a slight incline in the alley, approaching the point Clara had predicted. She anticipated every micro-motion, every glance toward potential observation points, every sign of uncertainty. Manhattan's night was alive, but the figures were now playing in her carefully constructed parameters. Eli's voice confirmed silently what she already knew. They've committed. No turning back. Clara allowed herself the faintest smile. The first confrontation had been set, not with aggression but with calculation. Every movement, every pause, every hesitation of the figures had reinforced her control. Her silent influence shaped the engagement, establishing hierarchy and setting the tone for the night. As the figures reached the midpoint of the alley, Clara reflected briefly. Power is never about noise. It's about influence. Control perception, control the outcome. Her eyes scanned the rooftops, the alleyways, the city streets stretching endlessly beyond. Manhattan's hum persisted, oblivious to the silent game above it. And in that calculated silence, the heiress reaffirmed her mastery, fully awake, fully aware, fully in command of the shadows. The city below shimmered like a pool of liquid silver, each streetlight and neon sign reflecting the pulse of Manhattan's restless energy. Clara Monroe stood by the window, watching the figures in the alley with the precision of a seasoned tactician. Every micro-movement, every hesitation, every glance was data feeding her strategy. Tonight was not about confrontation, it was about shaping outcomes before the first move was noticed. Eli leaned in, eyes scanning the tablet. They've settled into their positions. Ready for next phase? Clara's gaze never wavered. Yes. But we proceed with subtlety. Influence, not force. Perception is our weapon. A faint sound, the scrape of a metal object, a door hinge, alerted her to the secondary figure moving toward the alley's midpoint. She calculated probabilities. Distance, timing, lines of sight, potential escape routes. Manhattan streets were more than concrete and light. They were a living grid of opportunity and threat. Adjust cameras to rooftop coverage, she instructed softly. Feed angles to the alley. Track every movement. Eli complied, fingers moving quickly. All feeds live. Every angle monitored. Clara's mind raced through contingencies. If the primary figure advanced, they would move into a calculated interception point. If the secondary moved, they would be guided along a path that appeared free but led exactly where Clara wanted. The beauty of strategy, she thought, is that the opponent feels in control, even when they are guided by your design. The secondary figure hesitated at the edge of the alley, scanning for movement. Clara noted every subtle gesture. A weight shift, a glance, a slight fidget. Overconfidence, she whispered. Every calculated risk has its tell. Eli looked at her, intrigued. You really can predict them before they act. Clara allowed a faint smile. Not predict. Anticipate. Observation turns uncertainty into power. Outside, the city's hum continued. Distant sirens, the faint honk of taxis, footsteps echoing against brick walls, neon lights flickering. Each element was data, each sound a variable to integrate into her plan. Manhattan had layers, and tonight she navigated every layer with precision. The primary figure moved forward, stepping into the middle of the alley. Clara calculated their trajectory, adjusting mental maps for timing, angles, and possible contingencies. She gestured subtly to Eli, indicating a minor adjustment in camera focus. The secondary figure reacted, slightly misstepping, revealing their assumption that they were unseen. Good, Clara murmured. They're committing to the path we've designed. Let's guide perception further. Eli nodded, executing her subtle adjustments. Every light change, every shadow, every camera angle was manipulated to reinforce her silent influence. The figures moved exactly where she had intended, unaware that their decisions were now orchestrated. Minutes passed, tension rising. The figures paused near a fire escape, reassessing. Clara noted their hesitation. This is where decisions are made. One misstep can reveal intent. She leaned toward Eli. Prepare contingency. If they split, we cover all exits. If they advance together, maintain observation and adjust guidance subtly. No engagement unless absolutely necessary. Eli's fingers flew over the tablet. Angles ready. Interception points mapped. Alternate exits monitored. Clara allowed herself a brief reflection, considering the weight of the night. Manhattan's pulse was constant, relentless, yet all of it flowed into her awareness. The city below was oblivious, unaware that a silent game of power was being played above its streets, in the shadows, guided entirely by observation and strategy. Suddenly, the primary figure made a sharp movement, a misstep caused by uneven pavement. Clara noted it immediately. Opportunity, she whispered. They've exposed a weakness. We proceed with subtle redirection. Eli adjusted feeds accordingly. Interception points updated. Ready for subtle guidance. Clara's mind ran through the consequences. Timing, lines of sight, potential observation by the secondary figure. Every micro-reaction matters. She adjusted the interior lighting slightly, casting shadows to obscure her position. Perception is power. Control perception, control outcomes. The secondary figure shifted, stepping closer to the primary's path, unaware of the subtle traps laid by Clara's anticipation. Her mind calculated each micro-decision, each pause, each glance. Let them feel in control. Every action under our observation builds advantage. Minutes stretched as the figures moved cautiously through the alley. Clara monitored every step, every hesitation, every line of sight. Manhattan's night was alive, but she controlled the narrative. Finally, a small misalignment between the primary and secondary figures appeared. They glanced at each other, uncertainty visible in micro-expressions. Clara noted it. This is leverage. Subtle but sufficient. Maintain positioning, she instructed Eli. We have initiative. Now, subtly reinforce perception of control. They should believe they are making choices. That's when advantage is greatest. The figures continued forward, now guided by her adjustments to light, shadows and camera perspectives. Every movement was predictable, every hesitation anticipated. Clara exhaled softly, satisfied with the orchestration. Manhattan continued below, unaware of the silent maneuvering occurring above. Eli glanced at her. Initiative secured. They still think they lead. Clara allowed a faint, controlled smile. Exactly. And that illusion will dictate every move tonight. Let them underestimate us, they always do. As the figures disappeared around a corner, Clara's mind remained alert, calculating subsequent steps, observing lines of sight and integrating all variables. The first maneuvers had succeeded without confrontation. She had guided perception, controlled movement, and established dominance without a single overt action. In the silence of her penthouse, above the restless Manhattan streets, the heiress smiled quietly. Power she knew was not loud. It was invisible. It was subtle. And tonight it had been demonstrated fully. The figures advanced cautiously, unaware of the subtle orchestration guiding their movements. Clara's eyes scanned every detail. A broken brick protruding from the alley, a loose pipe rattling slightly in the wind, the reflection of a streetlight off a puddle. Each minor detail could alter perception, reveal intention, or create opportunity. Manhattan, in all its chaos, was now a controlled environment under her observation. Eli leaned slightly closer, his voice a whisper. They're nearing the midpoint. Any deviation from predicted paths will be visible instantly. Clara's fingers hovered over her notebook, tracing lines connecting points of interest, shadows, escape routes, sight lines. Adjust lighting for maximum ambiguity. Let shadows guide them, not reveal us. Every microreaction is data. The primary figure hesitated near a fire escape, glancing upward, perhaps sensing surveillance. Clara noted the timing, pace, and head angle. They reveal intent with every subtle motion. She calculated the trajectory. If they continued, they would align perfectly with her predetermined path. A slight misstep now could still be exploited. A distant taxi horn echoed, bouncing off brick walls. The secondary figure paused, reacting to environmental stimuli, a momentary lapse that Clara instantly recognized. Predictable yet useful. She allowed a faint smile. Influence, unseen, was more potent than direct confrontation. Eli adjusted the surveillance feed. Secondary movement detected. Could be testing alignment. Clara nodded subtly. Let them. Each hesitation is an opportunity. Maintain observation and adjust micropaths silently. From her vantage point, she noted reflections in nearby windows. The figures were partially illuminated, partially hidden, a balance she could manipulate. The light flickering across the alley created intermittent shadows, perfect for misdirection. Clara subtly shifted interior blinds, altering perceived light angles. Control perception, control the board. Minutes passed. The primary figure approached the predicted interception point, while the secondary figure moved slightly offline, testing timing and distance. Clara's mind calculated probabilities, best and worst outcomes, reaction times, and escape options. Every variable had been anticipated. Adjust feeds to highlight escape routes and potential detours, she whispered. Eli complied, repositioning cameras with precision. A soft metallic noise, a trash lid sliding across concrete, caused the primary figure to pause. Clara noted the reaction. Subtle shoulder shift, a quick glance, microfacial tension. Confirmation of attention and awareness. She marked it mentally. The secondary figure stepped slightly too far, misjudging the distance to the wall. Clara's pulse remained calm. Perfect. Exploit their misalignment subtly, she murmured. Eli's eyes flicked up. Ready to guide them? Clara's gaze swept across the alley, the rooftops, and even the distant streets. Yes. Let them move as if uninfluenced. Every action under our observation builds advantage. And when the moment comes, they'll realize too late. The figures proceeded, each step calculated, yet seemingly spontaneous. Clara noted the subtle timing shifts, adjusting her internal map in real time. Manhattan's hum of traffic, occasional sirens, and distant conversation formed a complex acoustic map she interpreted instinctively. Suddenly, the primary figure stumbled slightly over an uneven patch of pavement, head turning instinctively to assess exposure. Clara registered the micro-error. They've committed a small miscalculation. Now, she whispered. Subtle reinforcement of the path. Make them think they are still leading. Eli adjusted interior blinds, creating a shadow that obscured any direct line of sight from the figure's perspective. Every minor environmental adjustment became part of her strategy. The secondary figure reacted to this subtle redirection, their pace adjusting as if sensing something amiss. Clara's mind catalogued the response. Every reaction confirms control. Minutes stretched. The figures finally reached the alley's midpoint. Clara exhaled softly, her mind processing the layers of movement, light and sound. Each step confirmed her anticipation. Each hesitation reinforced the illusion of autonomy given to her adversaries. Eli glanced at her. They're still unaware. Initiative is ours. Clara allowed a faint smile. Exactly. And that will dictate the rhythm for the rest of the night. Let them underestimate us, they always do. From the window, she observed subtle changes in the environment. A distant police siren, neon lights flickering on a side street, the reflection of headlights on glass facades. Every element could be used, every element could mislead. Manhattan's night was alive, but she had already woven her influence into its pattern. The first stage of strategic maneuvers had succeeded without overt confrontation. Clara and Eli had guided perception, subtly controlled movement, and established dominance while remaining unseen. The city continued its restless rhythm, oblivious to the silent chess game above its streets. Clara's mind raced ahead, anticipating the next variables. Unexpected obstacles, minor deviations, environmental changes. Each required precise attention, foresight, and subtle intervention. She glanced at Eli, who nodded in silent acknowledgement. Communication between them was effortless, unspoken, and perfect for maintaining control without exposure. Finally, the figures rounded a corner, out of sight but still within her calculated parameters. Clara allowed herself a brief, satisfied exhale. The maneuvers had confirmed her control. Perception dictated action, observation dictated outcome, and silence dictated power. Above the city streets of Manhattan, in the shadows and signals of the night, the heiress remained fully awake, fully aware, and fully in command. The clock struck 12 and Manhattan's heartbeat shifted subtly. Streets that had been relatively calm now carried a sharper rhythm. Distant car horns, occasional footsteps echoing off brick walls, the faint hum of rooftop HVAC units. Clara Monroe stood by her penthouse window, absorbing every detail. The first maneuvers had gone as planned, yet the city itself seemed to pulse with anticipation. Eli, monitoring multiple feeds, leaned close. "We have a new variable," he whispered. "Movement on the east side, approaching from the fire escape you marked earlier." Clara's gaze narrowed. "Unplanned. Could be ally or interference. Either way, we integrate it into the plan." Her mind immediately recalculated trajectories, timing, and potential observation points. Manhattan's night was complex, layered, and alive with opportunity. Every corner, every shadow, every reflective surface was now part of her strategy. Outside, a faint silhouette appeared on the rooftop, briefly illuminated by the blinking neon of a billboard. Clara noted the figure's posture, head movement, and pacing. "Experienced," she murmured. "Cautious, confident. Testing perception." Eli adjusted the cameras, capturing angles across the rooftops, alleyways, and streets below. "They're probing. Could be scouting or attempting distraction." Clara tapped her notebook, connecting new observation points to existing pathways. "We'll let them think they're hidden. Every reaction gives us data. Observation before action is always stronger." The silhouette paused, scanning multiple rooftops, calculating risk, unaware of the pattern she had already mapped. Clara's eyes flicked to the secondary figure in the alley below, still moving cautiously, unaware of the rooftop observer. The interplay of three sets of movement created a living puzzle. Eli whispered, "Timing is critical. Any misalignment and we lose subtle control." Clara tilted her head, processing possibilities. The first maneuver established dominance. The second will test adaptability. Influence must remain invisible. She adjusted the blinds slightly, manipulating interior lighting to alter shadows outside. Every reflection, every silhouette, now guided the perception of both figures. Minutes passed. Clara's mind ran calculations at lightning speed. Primary figure trajectory, secondary positioning, rooftop movements, ambient distractions, and timing of passing taxis. Each microsecond mattered. Manhattan's night was alive, yet under her silent orchestration. Then an unexpected noise, a metallic scrape from a nearby rooftop, caught her attention. The rooftop figure paused, subtly shifting stance. Clara recognized it immediately, a probe testing for reaction. A deliberate move. They are skilled but predictable. Eli's eyes met hers. "They're assessing. What's your call?" Clara's lips curved into a controlled, faint smile. We proceed, but with subtle redirection. Let them believe they control perception. That's when leverage is strongest. The secondary figure in the alley made a small misstep, a foot slipping slightly on wet pavement. Clara noted every micro-reaction, a shift in weight, a glance upward, a slight hesitation. Perfect, she whispered. They've revealed priorities and attention. We use it. Eli adjusted feeds, capturing the misalignment. Interception points updated. Contingencies ready. Clara allowed herself a brief reflection. Manhattan streets were alive with unknowing participants. A delivery driver, a street sweeper, pedestrians crossing at distant intersections. Each movement contributed subtly to her calculations. Observation was not passive, it was a tool of influence. A distant siren wailed, bouncing off skyscrapers. Both figures momentarily hesitated, scanning their surroundings. Clara noted the pause, the tilt of the head, the shift in stance. Every reaction is confirmation of control. She adjusted interior blinds again, ensuring shadows fell in calculated patterns, masking her exact positioning. Eli whispered, primary subject approaching intersection. Secondary still aligned with plan, but timing slightly off. Clara's eyes scanned rapidly. Minor deviation. Acceptable. Adjust guidance subtly. Do not act overtly. Influence perception, maintain control. The rooftop figure shifted again, attempting to align with the alley below. Clara noted the trajectory, anticipating micro-movements that would reveal intent. They think they're unseen. That assumption is their weakness, she murmured. Minutes stretched, tension thickening. The first probe of the night had evolved into a dynamic interplay of positioning, timing, and perception. Clara's pulse remained calm. Her mind, however, raced with probabilities and contingencies. Manhattan's night was both stage and opponent. Every shadow, every flicker of light, every reflection was data. The primary figure entered a blind spot briefly, the secondary figure hesitating in response. Clara recognized the moment as an opportunity, a brief window to subtly manipulate perception without direct engagement. She adjusted a camera feed, changing a slight reflection angle on the alley wall, guiding the secondary figure along a path that aligned perfectly with her strategic intent. Eli leaned in. They've taken the bait. Clara's lips curved into a faint, satisfied smile. Exactly. They've committed. Now we observe the unfolding consequences. Influence is now active, unseen, and unchallenged. The city continued its restless rhythm below. Taxis, footsteps, distant laughter, neon reflections. But all movements had been anticipated, calculated, or guided. Manhattan's pulse had become a tool, and Clara Monroe wielded it with silent authority. The rooftop figure finally paused, and Clara observed micro-reactions. Head angle, hand gestures, subtle hesitation. Each confirmed her dominance over perception, and the first stage of midnight intrigue had been won. Eli glanced at her. We've established control without confrontation. Initiative is ours. Clara nodded slightly, eyes scanning the cityscape one last time. The night is young. Manhattan will reveal its variables. We will remain in control, silent, unseen, and fully aware. Above the city streets, in the interplay of shadows, light, and signal, the heiress demonstrated the power of subtle influence. Manhattan might never know the extent of her control, but tonight, every movement, hesitation, and reaction was orchestrated to her advantage. Manhattan's skyline stretched endlessly, a lattice of lights and shadows that pulsed with the rhythm of the city below. Clara Monroe stood by her penthouse window, observing the urban grid as if it were a living organism. The movements of cars, pedestrians, and streetlights weren't random. They were patterns, signals, and potential points of influence. Eli leaned over her shoulder, tablet in hand, feeds from multiple angles displayed in precise synchronization. Primary and secondary figures are moving predictably. Ready for the next phase? Clara nodded, her mind calculating sequences and contingencies. Yes. But this is where precision matters most. Every signal, subtle as it may be, must be interpreted and responded to immediately. She pulled out a small leather-bound notebook filled with codes, symbols, and shorthand only she could decipher. Each mark represented a potential route, an observation point, or a contingency. Every variable had a corresponding signal, a way to communicate with allies silently, without alerting adversaries. Let's implement the signals, she said softly. Adjust lights, blinds, and reflections to communicate pathing and timing. Let them think they're moving freely. Influence perception without touching them. Eli nodded, fingers flying over the tablet. The interior lighting shifted subtly, casting shadows across the alley below, altering perceived sightlines. Exterior cameras captured these changes and displayed them in real time on multiple screens. Each subtle shift manipulated the awareness of the figures moving below. A faint reflection caught Clara's eye, a glint of metal from the secondary figure's hand. Perhaps a phone, perhaps a device. Either way, she factored it into the unfolding strategy. "They're probing perception," she murmured. "Let them. Every reaction is data for us." The primary figure paused briefly, scanning the surroundings, unaware that each micro-movement had already been anticipated. Clara noted the shift in weight, the tilt of the head, the subtle alignment of shoulders. "They're cautious but predictable," she whispered. Eli added quietly, "They may attempt a diversion. How do we respond?" Clara's gaze swept across the cityscape, mapping angles, rooftops, and alleys. "We integrate it. Signals will guide movement. Every deviation anticipated. Let them believe initiative is theirs." Minutes passed. Clara's mind ran multiple simultaneous calculations: timing, trajectory, microreactions, environmental variables, and the coordination of silent signals. Each variable fed into her predictive model. Manhattan's cityscape, from her vantage point, had become a dynamic chessboard. A distant siren echoed off the skyscrapers, causing the secondary figure to pause. Clara noted the micro-hesitation, a tilt of the head, a slight foot adjustment, an imperceptible shift in focus. Confirmation. Observation confirmed. She subtly adjusted the interior blinds, creating a shadow pattern that would manipulate the figure's perception. Eli tapped a few commands, redirecting camera feeds and updating observation logs. Secondary pathway clear. Primary still on expected trajectory. Clara's lips curved into a faint, controlled smile. "Perfect. Keep all signals consistent. No abrupt changes. Subtlety is our strongest weapon." The rooftop figure moved again, approaching a vantage point overlooking the alley. Clara anticipated the trajectory and calculated the timing. "They believe they see the full picture, but we guide the perception. Every reaction reinforces our control." Eli's voice was low, precise. "Signal feeds ready. All observers synchronized." Clara exhaled softly. Manhattan's night, with all its chaos and movement, had been distilled into information, patterns, probabilities, and influence. Every light, every shadow, every reflective surface was now a tool for communication and control. The primary figure reached a midpoint along the alley, pausing as if calculating next steps. Clara noted the hesitation, the slight backward glance, and the adjustment of the device in hand. She whispered to Eli, "They've committed to the path we set. Maintain subtle guidance. Let perception dictate action." Eli nodded. All feeds locked. Contingencies mapped. From her vantage point, Clara observed a taxi rounding a corner, a pedestrian crossing at a distance, and a faint glow from a neon sign. Every environmental factor was part of her calculations. The figures moved through the city unaware that every step, every pause, every hesitation was orchestrated. The secondary figure made a small misstep, overestimating distance from a shadow. Clara's mind cataloged the reaction. Exploitable micro-error. Opportunity. She adjusted blinds and lighting again, reinforcing the path subtly. Every shadow, every glint of light, every reflective surface communicated to the figures where to move, without them realizing it. Minutes stretched. The figures advanced, guided by invisible hands, yet convinced they were acting independently. Clara allowed herself a faint smile. Influence unseen was more powerful than force. Eli whispered, "Primary aligned with trajectory. Secondary following the subtle path." Both unaware of manipulation. Clara's eyes scanned the alley and rooftops one last time. The night is ours to control. Every signal, every pause, every micro-movement reinforces dominance. Manhattan's rhythm hummed below, oblivious to the silent orchestration. Above the city, in the interplay of shadows, lights, and signals, the heiress demonstrated the mastery of strategic subtlety. Influence, anticipation, and silent communication had dictated every action. Power, she reflected, was not loud, it was invisible, patient, and precise. The city's pulse never ceased even at this hour. Manhattan streets were alive with movement, yet Clara Monroe saw patterns where others saw chaos. She scanned the alleyways, rooftops, and streets below, noting the slight sways in the fire escapes, the flicker of neon on puddles, and the rhythm of distant taxis. Every detail became part of a silent map, a web of influence she could manipulate without ever revealing herself. Eli's tablet pinged softly. Secondary figure adjusting pace. Possibly testing observation. What's your read? Clara's eyes narrowed. They think they're unpredictable. Minor errors in pacing confirm attention and caution. Good. Keep tracking. Do not reveal that we are aware. The rooftop figure shifted again, subtly changing position, trying to gauge whether anyone was watching from the penthouse above. Clara tilted her head slightly, noting the micro-movement. A small step backward, a head tilt, a hand brushing a railing. They're probing but predictable, she whispered. Let's guide perception subtly. She adjusted the blinds, casting a deliberate pattern of shadow across the alley below. The figure's eyes caught the shifts, and their micro-reactions confirmed the effectiveness of her strategy. Minutes stretched, tension building silently. Clara's mind raced. Probability tables, escape routes, potential deviations, environmental variables. Manhattan's night was a dynamic chessboard, and she calculated every possible move before it occurred. A faint metallic sound, an object shifting on a rooftop, caused the primary figure to pause, looking around. Clara noted the hesitation, the way the shoulders tensed slightly, and the quick glance toward the secondary figure. Perfect, she thought. The first moment of doubt. Opportunity. Eli glanced at her. Do we act now or continue observation? Clara exhaled softly. Observation. The slightest overt action will alert them. Influence is strongest when invisible. She tapped the notebook, marking tiny symbols corresponding to movements and micro-errors. Every reaction becomes a piece of data. Every pause is leverage. Outside, Manhattan hummed with life. A distant police siren, a taxi weaving through traffic, footsteps echoing against brick walls, all contributed to the sensory landscape. Clara incorporated each sound, each flash of light into her calculations. Every pedestrian, every moving vehicle became a variable in her silent orchestration. The secondary figure shifted their attention toward a street lamp, misjudging distance slightly. Clara noted it immediately. Micro-error. Exploitable. Adjust guidance subtly. Eli altered camera angles and interior blinds accordingly. Feeds adjusted. All observation points active. Clara allowed a faint, controlled smile. They are following the paths we've guided, unaware that each choice is orchestrated. That's the power of perception. The primary figure approached a midpoint in the alley, pausing briefly. Clara predicted the pause. She whispered to Eli, we guide them slightly left. Not overtly, just enough to maintain control. Keep signals subtle. Maintain belief in their autonomy. Eli nodded silently. Fingers flying across the tablet, he shifted feeds, adjusted angles, and ensured that every micro-movement was visible to them yet guided according to Clara's plan. Minutes passed in tense observation. The rooftop figure made another slight movement, attempting alignment with the alley below. Clara anticipated the trajectory and micro-adjusted interior shadows to obscure their perception. Every flicker of light and shadow had been calculated. The secondary figure took a small misstep, too far, too quickly. Clara's pulse remained calm. Perfect. They reveal their own limitations, she whispered. Maintain observation. Adjust perception. Eli glanced at her. All feeds synchronized. No anomalies beyond predicted parameters. Clara surveyed the entire scenario, internalizing the flow of movement, shadows, and light. Manhattan streets below were oblivious to the silent orchestration above. Every vehicle, every pedestrian, every reflection was now a tool in their control. Finally, the figures progressed along the paths Clara had subtly reinforced. Every hesitation, every micro-error, every pause had been predicted and leveraged. She allowed herself a small exhale. The first stage of manipulation was complete. Influence had been exerted silently, and control was now unquestioned. Eli finally spoke, voice low. Initiative remains with us. Both subjects unaware. Clara nodded, eyes sweeping the city once more. The night is ours. Every shadow, every light, every signal is under our command. They will never realize how completely their actions have been guided. Above Manhattan, in the interplay of shadows and signals, the heiress confirmed her mastery, unseen, precise, and fully aware. Power was silent, deliberate, and absolute. Tonight, influence was invisible, and the city danced exactly as she had anticipated. Manhattan's skyline glimmered like a web of stars captured in glass and steel. Clara Monroe stood at her window, observing the night below. Each street, alley, and rooftop was alive with movement. The steady pulse of taxis, the occasional pedestrian, the faint flicker of neon lights reflecting off wet pavement. To an untrained eye, it was ordinary. To Clara, it was a map of influence, control, and potential risk. Eli stood beside her, scanning multiple feeds across several tablets. Primary and secondary subjects remain on course. No anomalies, but additional variables detected. Light reflections from nearby windows. Could be a distraction or a misread by them. Clara tilted her head, calculating possibilities. We will integrate. Every distraction can be leveraged. Every misread is an opportunity. Maintain observation but do not engage. She pulled her notebook closer, filled with shorthand codes, lines, and symbols marking observation points, escape routes, and influence channels. Every detail matters. Every movement is part of the pattern. Minutes passed in measured silence. Then a subtle alert. A third figure appeared on a nearby rooftop, partially obscured by shadows. Clara's eyes narrowed. Unexpected variable. She recalculated the strategy instantly. Trajectories, sightlines, micro-adjustments for perception control. Manhattan's night had layers, and each layer was now critical. They're testing coordination, Eli whispered. Third player could be ally or opposition. Clara's pulse remained steady. Treat as unknown. Integrate into current guidance. The first objective remains, control perception. Outside, the city's rhythm persisted. Distant sirens, tires rolling over wet asphalt, footsteps echoing against walls, a stray dog barking in a side alley. Each sound, each light flicker, each movement became part of her sensory map. Manhattan was alive, but under her observation, it was also controllable. She gestured subtly to Eli, indicating shifts in interior lighting and blinds. Shadows fell across the alley and rooftops in precise patterns. Every micro-movement communicates subtly, paths, priorities, timing. Influence without contact. The rooftop figure moved slightly, revealing a reflective glint from a device in hand. Clara's eyes tracked the motion. They're observing. Probing boundaries. Let them. Every reaction is data. Eli adjusted camera feeds. Angle optimized. Secondary pathways covered. Clara leaned back slightly, letting the tension sharpen her focus. The balancing act isn't just about control. It's about maintaining multiple layers of perception, influence, and anticipation simultaneously. One misstep, one overlooked reaction, and the hierarchy could collapse. She recalled lessons from her father. True power lies in maintaining equilibrium between observation and action, influence and patience, risk and opportunity. Tonight, every principle applied. The primary figure in the alley paused, glanced upward, adjusting their stance subtly. Clara noted the micro-adjustment, shift in weight, subtle head movement. A clue to intent. A hint of hesitation. An exploitable signal. Minutes passed. The rooftop figure mirrored movements below, attempting to align with the alley traffic. Clara anticipated the trajectory and recalibrated influence points. Subtle light changes, shadow adjustments, and redirected perception channels. Eli's voice remained quiet, calm. Primary aligned. Secondary adjusting. Third still unaccounted for an exact path. Clara considered options. She could guide all three players along paths that seemed autonomous but were orchestrated. Introduce a controlled diversion to test reactions. Observe silently and gather additional intelligence before taking subtle action. Her decision was instantaneous. We guide. Let perception dictate action. Influence without exposure. Observation is paramount. The alley's shadows shifted with a breeze. Streetlights flickered intermittently, reflecting off windows and puddles. Clara noted each micro-reflection, integrating environmental variables into her strategy. Every footstep, every vehicle passing by, every ambient sound contributed to her control. The primary and secondary figures moved forward along subtly reinforced paths. The rooftop figure paused briefly, then adjusted trajectory, unaware of the subtle orchestration directing each decision. Clara smiled faintly. They believe they lead. They do not. Eli whispered, secondary figure micro-error detected. Slight misalignment in timing. Clara's eyes lit with anticipation. Perfect. We exploit. Maintain all signals. No sudden movements. Every adjustment subtle, invisible. Minutes stretched, tension building. The alley, rooftops, and surrounding streets became a living chessboard. Clara's mental map integrated every micro-decision, environmental variable, and potential deviation. Manhattan's cityscape was both stage and tool. Finally, the figures reached points Clara had pre-calculated. Slight pauses, micro-movements, and minor adjustments revealed intent and priorities. Clara adjusted interior lighting once more, guiding perception without a single audible signal. The hierarchy of movement had been established. Eli glanced at her. All three subjects aligned. Initiative remains with us. No exposure. Clara allowed herself a quiet, controlled smile. Exactly. The balancing act is maintained. Influence without action. Subtle, silent, absolute. From her vantage point, she observed Manhattan's restless streets. Taxis weaving, pedestrians crossing, distant sirens echoing. Each contributed to the sensory map that she now fully controlled. Every shadow, every reflection, every pause of a moving figure was leveraged. In the silence of her penthouse, above the city, the heiress had proven mastery not by confrontation, but by observation, anticipation, and subtle orchestration. Manhattan moved below unaware, guided invisibly, perfectly, and without realizing it. The early hours of Manhattan carried a hush that only heightened awareness. Clara Monroe sat in the penthouse study, the city below glowing in fragmented reflections from streetlights and neon signs. Her notebook lay open, filled with shorthand codes, observation points, and carefully charted contingencies. Every decision tonight was critical. Every choice a potential pivot in the web of influence she navigated. Eli leaned over, scanning live feeds from alleyways, rooftops, and surrounding streets. All primary subjects remain on path. No deviations, but environmental variables are shifting: wind, light reflection, distant vehicles. Clara tapped a pen lightly against the notebook. Then we adjust. Every micro change is a signal. Every shadow can communicate. Observation without intervention is our advantage. She rose, walking toward the window. Manhattan stretched endlessly below, streets glowing like veins of light through the city. A yellow taxi moved cautiously along a side street, its headlights reflecting in puddles. Pedestrians crossed at intersections, oblivious to the subtle orchestration above them. Clara noted every pause, every glance, every movement. These weren't distractions. They were elements to be leveraged. Turning back, she addressed Eli quietly. Tonight, the boardroom session must appear routine. But behind closed doors, influence is silent yet absolute. Every ally, every rival, every silent observer must be accounted for. Our control is invisible but complete. Eli nodded. Communication signals are ready. Subtle cues, minimal exposure. Any misstep, and adjustments can be made instantly. Minutes passed in tense silence. Clara's mind ran calculations for multiple contingencies. If a secondary player deviates unexpectedly, if a hidden agenda surfaces, if perception shifts, every possibility was anticipated. Manhattan's night had become a dynamic grid of signals, shadows, and micro-movements. A faint chime from her secure device alerted her to a message from the family office. Boardroom meeting delayed. Security protocols updated. Unscheduled visitor may arrive. Clara's pulse remained steady. Unscheduled variables, she murmured. Good. Let's see how perception and influence play out. Eli's eyes flicked toward her, reading the micro-expression that only he could interpret. Do we prepare for potential confrontation or continue observation? Clara's gaze swept across multiple monitors. Observation. Influence will guide outcomes before any action is required. Remember, power is silent. The less they notice, the stronger our control. The city below hummed with ambient noise. Distant sirens, car tires on wet asphalt, faint footsteps. Each sound became data, each flicker of light a cue. Clara integrated these variables seamlessly into her mental map. Suddenly, a reflection caught her attention. A glint from the rooftop figure she had been tracking. Their movement suggested an intention to reposition. Clara's mind ran through potential responses. Redirect through shadows, adjust light patterns, or allow slight deviation to encourage predictable reaction. Adjust blinds and interior lighting, she instructed softly. Guide perception subtly. Let them make the next visible choice under our control. Eli's hands moved swiftly, executing precise adjustments. The rooftop figure's movement remained unnoticed, yet perfectly aligned with Clara's orchestration. The alley figures below continued as expected, micro-errors subtly reinforcing her influence. Clara allowed herself a brief reflection. Tonight, the boardroom isn't just a room. It's a stage. Every ally, every observer, every potential threat is part of a larger signal network. Influence is quiet but decisive. The minutes stretched. Manhattan's restless rhythm continued, yet every movement below and above was guided invisibly. Clara considered potential outcomes. micro-errors, reactions to subtle cues, environmental shifts. Every scenario had been preemptively calculated. Eli spoke softly, primary aligned with predicted path. Secondary and rooftop variables within expected parameters. Clara nodded, eyes scanning each feed. Perfect. Now we let perception dictate action. No intervention unless necessary. Influence unseen is absolute. Suddenly, a faint, unexpected sound, a window shutter clattering on a nearby rooftop, caused the primary figure to hesitate. Clara noted the reaction instantly. Subtle shoulder tension, head tilt, slight shift in stance. Confirmation. Influence is effective. She adjusted interior blinds once more, casting shadows to reinforce perception guidance. The figures moved as intended, unaware that every choice was subtly orchestrated. Minutes later, a yellow taxi passed slowly beneath the alley, its headlights reflecting off wet pavement. Secondary figures flinched subtly, micro-adjusting pathing. Clara's smile was faint but controlled. Every movement confirms control. Every hesitation reinforces influence. The rooftop figure finally settled, aligning trajectory with the alley below. Clara's internal calculations confirmed the first phase of influence was successful. All variables had responded as predicted. Manhattan, below its oblivious glow, had become a chessboard and she, fully aware, had moved all pieces with silent precision. Eli exhaled softly. Boardroom influence secured. All primary players guided, invisible control maintained. Clara nodded, allowing herself a subtle smile. Exactly. Silent authority is stronger than confrontation. Perception is our ally. And tonight, every variable, every shadow, every micro-movement confirms it. Above Manhattan, in the interplay of light, shadows and silent signals, the heiress reinforced her mastery. Patient, invisible, precise and fully aware. Power, she reflected, was never loud. It was subtle, deliberate and unchallenged, yet absolute. The city below shimmered in fractured pools of neon and streetlight, the pulse of Manhattan like a living organism that never paused. Clara Monroe stood at her penthouse window, eyes tracing alleyways, rooftops and side streets. Every movement, every shadow, every reflection became a signal, a piece of data feeding her strategy. Eli hovered beside her, monitoring multiple feeds. Primary and secondary figures remain on predicted paths. No anomalies yet, but environmental factors are shifting. Wind patterns, reflective surfaces, distant traffic. Clara tapped her notebook, lines and symbols connecting observation points, escape routes and contingencies. Then we adjust. Each micro-change is a signal. Each shadow a guide. Let perception dictate action. She paused, thinking about the implications beyond the streets. Family expectations, the unseen agendas of allies, potential betrayals from rivals. The decisions she made tonight weren't limited to alleyways or rooftops. They extended to boardrooms, investments, and silent influence networks. One misstep could unravel everything. Minutes passed as she considered the options. Maintain complete observation, letting all actors proceed under invisible guidance. Introduce subtle misdirection to test loyalty and reaction. Engage directly through silent signals to shift trajectory strategically. Eli's voice broke her focus. Which approach do you prefer? Clara's gaze swept across Manhattan's nightscape. Influence without exposure. We maintain control but let them think they lead. Micro-errors will reveal intent and priorities. Outside, the primary figure adjusted trajectory, the secondary followed subtly, and the rooftop figure moved into a vantage point she had predicted. All actions aligned with her calculated patterns. Manhattan's night was alive with potential. Lights reflected on windows, taxis hummed down avenues, pedestrians moved along sidewalks, all adding variables to her mental map. A sudden sound, a metallic scrape from a nearby rooftop, caused the primary figure to pause. Clara noted the reaction immediately. A shoulder tension, slight head tilt, micro-shift in stance. Confirmation of awareness. Observation validated. Eli whispered, "They've detected a signal, maybe environmental. How do we respond?" Clara's fingers hovered over the notebook. Adjust blinds, subtle shadows. Let perception continue guiding action. The less they notice, the more control we maintain. The alley figures moved cautiously, micro-errors appearing as slight hesitations and small misalignments. Clara's mind catalogued each. Potential leverage, predictive paths, contingency responses. Every pause, glance, and step became part of her invisible web. Minutes passed. The rooftop figure mirrored movements below, adjusting to the subtle manipulation of light and shadow. Clara allowed a faint, controlled smile. They think they are independent. That's our advantage. Eli tapped the tablet, shifting feeds to anticipate any unexpected movement. All points aligned. Secondary adjustments in progress. Clara's internal monologue continued rapidly. If a misstep occurs, we will guide it. If a deviation happens, contingency paths will absorb it. Influence is silent. Observation is power. Perception is absolute. Suddenly, the secondary figure paused near a reflection, misjudging distance slightly. Clara noted the micro-error. Opportunity. She adjusted lighting again, guiding perception subtly without direct interference. Eli glanced at her. Do we intervene further? Clara shook her head slightly. No. Let them reveal priorities through action. Every decision they make under our influence strengthens control. The web is tightening. The city's hum, sirens, distant conversations, tires on wet pavement, footsteps echoing, formed a backdrop to the silent orchestration. Manhattan had become a stage, each alley, rooftop, and street a controlled variable. Clara observed and calculated, fully aware of the consequences. Minutes later, both alley figures aligned perfectly with pre-calculated paths. The rooftop figure settled into a predicted position. Clara exhaled softly. First phase complete. Influence is total, unseen, and unchallenged. Eli whispered, initiative remains ours. All actors guided, none aware. Clara allowed a subtle, satisfied smile. Exactly. Control perception, control action. Silent authority is absolute. Her gaze swept across the city one last time. Lights glimmered on the Hudson, reflections dancing in windows across streets, taxis weaving, pedestrians moving. Each element contributed to her silent web of influence. Above Manhattan, in the interplay of shadows, signals, and micro-movements, the Heiress had demonstrated mastery. Decisions, influence, and perception, silent yet absolute, defined the night. Manhattan moved beneath her unaware, guided precisely by unseen hands. The city below shimmered under Manhattan's scattered neon and streetlights, each reflection glinting off wet asphalt and glass facades. Clara Monroe stood by her window, notebook open, fingers tracing lines that represented observation points, predicted paths, and subtle contingencies. Tonight she wasn't just observing, she was orchestrating. Every alley, rooftop, and street became part of a silent choreography, guided by perception, anticipation, and influence. Eli leaned in, tablet in hand. Primary figures are maintaining trajectory. Secondary adjustments are minimal. Unexpected variable. A small group approaching from the east side, unaccounted for in previous observations. Clara's eyes narrowed. Unscheduled variables. Perfect. She adjusted blinds, shifting interior shadows. Integrate. Influence without exposure. Every movement is data. Outside, the city hummed with life. Tires rolling, footsteps echoing, distant sirens, pedestrians crossing sidewalks, neon lights flickering intermittently. Each element became part of her dynamic calculation. Manhattan's night was a living, breathing organism, and she read it like a map of hidden opportunity. Minutes passed. The primary figures moved through the alley as anticipated. The rooftop figure adjusted stance slightly, scanning for observation points. Clara's mind ran multiple predictive simulations simultaneously. If they paused, advanced, or deviated, how would perception shift? What micro-errors would appear and how could they be leveraged? Eli whispered, secondary figures responding to micro-changes. We maintain trajectory. Clara tapped lightly on the notebook. Good. Every reaction is reinforcing control. Maintain influence. No exposure. Then a sudden faint metallic sound from a nearby rooftop, an unexpected micro-movement. The primary figure paused, shoulders tensing subtly. Clara noted every fraction of hesitation, every glance. Confirmation. Opportunity. She adjusted lighting again, creating shadows to guide perception. Minutes stretched. The group approaching from the east became slightly visible. Their movement suggested caution, awareness, but also inexperience. Clara observed micro-behaviors, shifting weight, glancing around, adjusting hand positions. Each reaction fed into her silent orchestration. Eli looked to her. Do we engage or observe? Clara's eyes scanned the cityscape, noting all environmental variables. Reflections in windows, distant traffic, flickering streetlights, rooftop vantage points. Observe. Influence subtly. Let perception dictate action. Control is strongest when invisible. The primary figure advanced, micro-errors appearing as slight hesitation in step, subtle shifts in posture. Clara noted it, leverage for later strategic maneuvers. Manhattan had become a chessboard, each actor a piece moving exactly where she intended. Minutes later, the secondary group split slightly, testing alignment and timing. Clara's mind immediately recalculated contingencies, integrating environmental factors and micro-reactions. Every pause, glance, and step reveals priorities. She gestured to Eli, who adjusted feeds and interior shadows accordingly. Every reflection, every flicker of light now guided movement subtly. Clara allowed herself a brief reflection. Tonight, the night unfolds not through confrontation, but through perception and influence. Every actor, every shadow, every micro-movement is accounted for. A distant siren echoed off skyscrapers, causing both primary and secondary figures to pause briefly. Clara noted each micro-shift, recalculating probabilities. Every environmental factor can be leveraged to reinforce control. Minutes passed in tense silence. The rooftop figure mirrored movements below, adjusting subtly to her manipulations. Clara's lips curved faintly. They think they lead. They do not. Eli whispered, trajectory remains stable. Secondary micro-errors within predicted range. Clara exhaled softly. Good. Maintain subtle guidance. Influence is strongest when unnoticed. Silent control dictates the night. The primary figures reached a midpoint along their path. Clara anticipated the micro-hesitation, predicting the next small adjustments. She adjusted blinds and interior lighting again, reinforcing subtle direction. Every shadow, every reflection, every micro-gesture now guided perception. Minutes later, the unexpected group from the east approached closer, slightly misaligned with intended paths. Clara smiled faintly. Perfect. Minor deviation creates predictable responses. Eli tapped his tablet. All observation points active. Micro-adjustments in effect. Clara's mind integrated all variables. Alley, rooftop, street traffic, pedestrian patterns, and reflective surfaces. The city was both stage and tool. Every decision made by the figures now reinforced her silent orchestration. Finally, the primary figures aligned with predicted paths, the secondary slightly off but guided subtly, and the rooftop observer settled into a calculated position. Clara exhaled softly, satisfied. Influence unseen is absolute. Eli glanced at her. All variables controlled. Initiative remains ours. Clara allowed a faint, satisfied smile. Exactly. Power is silent, patient, and invisible. Tonight, Manhattan dances to perception alone. Above the city streets, in shadows, reflections, and silent signals, the Heiress demonstrated mastery. Decisions, influence, and perception define the night. Manhattan moved below, unaware that every micro-movement, hesitation, and reaction was guided precisely by her calculations. The wind whipped along the streets below, carrying the distant hum of Manhattan's restless pulse. Clara Monroe stood at the penthouse window, notebook in hand, eyes scanning alleys, rooftops, and the scattered glow of streetlights. Tonight, the city itself was a living map, and each movement, each shadow, each flicker of light conveyed information. Eli leaned in, monitoring multiple feeds. Primary figures are aligned, but there's an unexpected movement. Rooftop, northeast corner. Could be an external variable, unscheduled. Clara's gaze sharpened. Unplanned. Opportunity. She adjusted interior lighting, shifting shadows to guide perception. Observe first. Influence without exposure. Every micro-movement is data. The rooftop figure paused, scanning, unaware that their trajectory was now subtly guided. Clara's mind calculated probability trees. Paths, hesitation points, environmental cues, and possible errors. Every reaction was anticipated. Manhattan streets were alive, but under her observation, controlled. Minutes passed. The primary alley figures continued, guided subtly, micro-errors reinforcing perception. The rooftop figure moved again, slightly off predicted alignment. Clara noted the deviation immediately. Minor but exploitable. Eli whispered, "Do we intervene now?" Clara shook her head subtly. No. Observation first. Influence silently. The less they realized, the stronger our control. A faint metallic scrape echoed from a nearby rooftop. The primary figure paused, shoulders tensing, micro-shifting stance. Clara noted every subtle gesture. Confirmation of attention. Opportunity reinforced. Minutes stretched. Manhattan hummed below, taxis weaving, footsteps echoing, sirens distant. Clara integrated each sound and flicker of light into her mental map. Every reflection, every shadow, every passerby became a variable in the silent orchestration. Suddenly, the secondary figure hesitated near an intersection, misjudging distance slightly, a micro-error. Clara allowed herself a faint smile. Perfect. Predictable. Influence confirmed. Eli adjusted camera feeds. All points secured. Contingency ready for rooftop deviation. Clara exhaled softly. Good. Guide perception subtly. Every micro-adjustment reinforces authority. The unexpected rooftop figure moved again, now slightly closer to the alley. Clara anticipated the trajectory, recalculating probabilities in real time. Every micro-motion, head tilt, hand movement, and glance became part of her orchestration. Minutes passed, tension thickening. The alley figures mirrored the subtle manipulations, adjusting paths without awareness. The rooftop figure tested perception, micro-adjusting to the shadows she had engineered. Eli whispered, "They're probing for weaknesses. Any exposure could reveal control." Clara's gaze swept across Manhattan. Then maintained subtlety. Influence perception. Observation is power. Silence is authority. The first micro-conflict of the night emerged. A flicker of reflection from a side window caused the primary figure to pause. Clara noted it immediately. Micro-error, subtle hesitation, decision point. Opportunity. She adjusted blinds and interior lights, casting shadows to reinforce the path. Every movement below now aligned with her silent guidance. Minutes later, secondary figures misstepped slightly, overestimating distance from shadows. Clara cataloged the reactions. Micro-errors reveal intent. Perfect. Eli whispered softly, "Do we adjust further?" Clara shook her head. No. Let perception dictate action. Every choice under observation strengthens control. The city continued its rhythm. Distant sirens, tires rolling over asphalt, neon reflections, pedestrians passing. Clara's focus never wavered. Every environmental variable, every micro-reaction, every subtle hesitation became part of the silent game. Finally, the rooftop figure paused in mid-step, micro-aligning to the alley below. Clara exhaled softly. Control is absolute. Influence unseen. Eli glanced at her. Initiative maintained. Silent threat managed. All micro-errors accounted for. Clara allowed a faint, controlled smile. Exactly. Silent authority is invisible, patient, and decisive. Manhattan dances to perception tonight. Above the city, in shadows, signals, and micro-movements, the heiress demonstrated mastery. Observation, anticipation, and influence. Silent, precise, and unchallenged. The first light of Manhattan seeped through the glass facade of Clara Monroe's penthouse, washing the skyline in soft gold. The city that had throbbed with tension and silent maneuvering all night now exhaled quietly, streets glimmering with early sunlight reflecting off asphalt and glass. Clara stood at the window, notebook in hand, tracing the paths, pauses, and micro-movements of the night before. Every decision, hesitation, and reaction had been catalogued in her mind and in her carefully coded notes. Eli entered silently, carrying a tablet with the final overnight feeds. All variables accounted for, he whispered. No deviations. Every actor remained within predicted paths. Unseen influence maintained. Clara allowed herself a faint smile, her pulse calm but mind racing. Good. The web we wove last night held. Influence without exposure, still intact. Perception dictated action. Silent authority proved absolute. She moved to the desk, reviewing the notes and analyzing the subtle micro-errors from the primary and secondary figures, as well as the rooftop observer. Every hesitation, every small misstep, had revealed priorities, intentions, and weaknesses, all leveraged without direct confrontation. The family office, she murmured, they'll be pleased with results if framed correctly. Allies reassured, threats neutralized, perception of control maintained. Eli tapped the tablet. Do we need to prepare a briefing or maintain discretion? Clara's gaze swept Manhattan streets, now bathed in the soft morning glow. Taxis beginning their morning routes, pedestrians moving briskly on sidewalks, delivery trucks navigating avenues. Discretion. Silent authority carries more weight than overt celebration. Results will speak for themselves. Let perception consolidate the power we've exercised. Minutes passed as they reviewed environmental data, the reflection of sunlight off glass facades, the pattern of shadow movement in alleys, and the timing of morning activity. Each element confirmed her meticulous orchestration. Manhattan itself had danced to perception without knowing the choreographer. Eli leaned closer. Primary figures remain unaware of our control. Secondary and rooftop alignments fully accounted for. Any residual variables? Clara shook her head subtly. No. Night's influence remains intact. All participants moved as guided without perceiving the orchestration. Silent authority validated. She reflected briefly on the night's pressure, the careful calculations, and the micro-decisions that had ensured dominance. Every choice, every subtle shift, every shadow manipulated had reinforced control. The city itself had been a tool, an extension of strategy. The first rays of sun glinted off a taxi's windshield, reflecting briefly into the alley below. Clara observed the micro-effects. Pedestrians adjusting pace, shadows stretching differently, reflections altering perception. Even the morning light cannot undo the silent control exercised. Eli's eyes flicked toward her. Next steps. Clara exhaled softly, still observing the city below. Consolidation. Influence extends beyond immediate movement. Allies reassured, threats neutralized, perception aligned with authority. Tomorrow's strategy continues, silent, calculated, precise. The city hummed gently as morning traffic picked up, people immersed in routine, oblivious to the chessboard that had played out above their streets. Clara's gaze swept rooftops, alleys, and intersections once more. Every variable, every actor, every reflection had been accounted for. The night's strategy had succeeded without confrontation. Manhattan moves unaware, she murmured, but under observation, guided, influenced. Silent authority prevails. Eli nodded. All objectives achieved. Influence maintained. Silent threats mitigated. Clara allowed herself a final, subtle smile, feeling the weight and satisfaction of control, tempered with the quiet awareness of isolation. Power is silent, perception is key, and influence is absolute. Above the city streets of Manhattan, in the interplay of shadows, light, and signals, the heiress had orchestrated a flawless night. Decisions, observation, and anticipation had guided outcomes unseen. The city moved beneath her unaware, every actor guided by silent hands, reinforcing her authority and mastery. She turned away from the window, notebook in hand, ready to continue the work of the day, knowing that influence, patience, and observation would continue to dictate the rhythm of power.